Year of high school, I was the starting third baseman for our baseball team. And over the first 7 games of the season, I committed 7 errors. And that is horrendous. And our coach made sure that I knew that. Every day I would show up at practice. He would tell me, Beha, I'm going to try everybody at your position till I find someone to take it from you. And I did not so much appreciate that. Now looking back, I kind of do, because what we need every once in our life is to be able to see where we're really at and who we really are. Because when we actually see what's reality, then it can actually be the thing that helps us get where we ultimately want to go. If I hadn't seen where I was at, up to that point, baseball had come really, really easy for me. Like, for instance, this is what happened my sophomore year. I showed up at baseball tryouts. There was only going to be a couple underclassmen make the varsity team. I knew that. There was a lot of seniors. This was going to be a very good baseball team. And I was at my sophomore year of tryouts, and we were doing conditioning, which was never and still is not my favorite thing to do. And the coach actually kicked me out of the tryout because I was cheating so bad on the drill. He literally said, Beha, get out of my gym now. Cool. So I got kicked out of my sophomore tryout and still was one of 4 sophomores to make a team that ended up ranked 22nd in the nation. So I never really, baseball just kind of came to me pretty easily, and I never had much, I didn't care much about it. And so when I was a senior, and here I am, I've made 7 errors in 7 games, I needed someone to show me exactly who I really was, so the way then I could actually get where I wanted to go, because for the rest of the season after Game 7, I began to take a different route. Once I saw, hey, things aren't as good as I thought they were, took a different route and made 0 errors the rest of the year. So sometimes we need some bad news before we can ever get to the good change that we need in our life, right? Maybe you've had a doctor's appointment like this. You thought everything was going great, and you get a little bit of bad news, and they're like, hey, you need to make some changes, or else there's going to be some significant problems for you in the future if you don't. Or maybe you have a boss that comes in and says, hey, I'd like to talk to you about your performance. He goes, this is what's actually true about your performance, and if something doesn't change, there's going to be some significant issues. Bad news is not always a bad thing. Sometimes bad news can be the exact thing that we need to see ourselves appropriately, so that way we can get ultimately where we want to go. And so here we are, week 22 of Rise and Fall. And over the last couple of weeks, we've seen David, who was the anointed future king of Israel. He's still being chased around the wilderness by this madman, King Saul, for no good reason whatsoever. David has not done anything wrong. And in fact, what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, every chance that David has to get it wrong, he actually chooses the right path. He actually makes the right decision. And my guess, if you've been here for all of these, or maybe you listened to it at home if you missed one of them, you might go, okay, David, the first week he saw Saul in a really precarious situation in a cave that he could have got the best of him, and he decided to let him go. And then last week he has this guy named Nabal who disrespected him. David's like, I'm going to kill him. Abigail steps in and is like, David, don't do that. Don't put that blemish on your record. Don't go down that path. And he again gets it right. And my guess is if you're like me, you hear those stories and you walk away and you go, man, I want to be like David. I want to be that type of person that when I've got my enemy right in my sights, that I can actually walk away from it and go, you know what? I don't have to get even. I want to be the type of person that when someone disrespects me and I'm on a path towards destruction and someone goes, hey, I think you're on a bad path, I want to be the type of person that goes, you're right, and change course. But the truth is, a lot of times we're not like that. So we hear these stories of David and we go, oh man, I wish I was more like David. But honestly, this is what we do with all the stories though that we encounter, whether it's a movie or a book or something you're reading the Bible. My guess is if you're normal, every story you read, in your mind, you are playing the lead. You are the hero of the story every time it goes. So we've been listening to these stories and you go, I'm Dave. but I've just been having a bad day. I'm Dave, but like I need to try harder. Or like, you're always Harry Potter, right? You're always Superman or Batman or Spider-Man. You're always the leading role. You're always the one that gets it right, the hero. But you know, sometimes we're just having a bad day. It's actually that thing that goes on in our mind that clouds us from seeing who we really are, that keeps us from getting to where we ultimately want to go. That's what I want to do, because today's story is going to seem really, really similar to the story that we read 2 weeks ago. I don't need to point out all the things that we see in the passage that remind us of 2 weeks ago. You can go back and listen to that. But there's something in this text I want to show you that I think if you do actually desire to treat people the way that David treats them and to be more like David, there's actually a way that you can get there. And it might be through having to come to some difficult truth today. Ready for this? 1 Samuel chapter 26, beginning in verse 1, says this. Now some men from Ziph came to Saul at Gibeah to tell him, David is hiding on the hill of Hakilah, which overlooks Jeshimon. So just like 2 weeks ago, somebody ratted David out and told Saul where him and his men were hanging out. And so this is what Saul does once again, just like 2 weeks ago. He took 3,000 of Israel's elite troops and went to hunt him down in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul camped along the road beside the hill of Hakilah near Jeshimon where David was hiding. And when David learned that Saul had come after him into the wilderness, he sent out spies to verify the report of Saul's arrival. So Saul knows where David's at. He goes and camps near him. David sends his own spies out, finds out where Saul's at. And so the two of them are very aware of the situation that they find themselves in. It goes on, it says, David slipped over to Saul's camp one night to look around. So David decides, I know where Saul's camp is. I'm going to go take a look. And he's looking for a sidekick. And so he says, Saul and Abner, son of the commander of the army, were sleeping inside a ring formed by the slumbering warriors. Who will volunteer to go with me, David asks. He asked that to Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother. Abishai replies, I'll go with you. So David and Abishai went right into the camp and found him asleep with his spear stuck in the ground beside his head. Abner, which was the commander of the army, and the soldiers were lying asleep around him. So David and Abishai sneak into the enemy's camp, and they find King Saul, his commander of the army, sleeping in the middle, and they are surrounded by all of these warriors. And then this is what is said. God has surely handed your enemy over to you this time, Abishai whispered to David. Let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't need to strike twice. So David's little sidekick's like, dude, look, this is the second time we've had Saul in this situation. Here's his spear. Let me take his spear and pin him to the ground and be done with this once and for all. Which, to be honest, it sounds like a pretty good plan. If you'd been chased around the wilderness by a madman for over a decade for doing absolutely nothing wrong, and you catch him sleeping like that, it sounds like a pretty good plan. It sounds even better when the guy that's with you is going, look, I'll do it, and I think God wants us to do it. That's pretty hard to say no to whenever people do stuff like that. Here's what I love about that we see about the character of David, though. 3 weeks in a row, David has had his enemies in his sight, could have found any justification he wanted to act upon it, and all 3 times he gets it right. And if we're being honest, we're probably good for 1 for 3, right? Like when it comes to getting it right, we're like 1 for 3, and honestly, we'll celebrate a 1 for 3. You're like, but Major League Baseball hitters get into the Hall of Fame at 1 for 3. 300 average is pretty good. Right, like we go, I didn't screw it up every time. I got it right at least one time. What I like about David's character is like up to this point, we see a consistency in his character. I just want to remind you, if you're ever trying to do a little soul searching going, where am I really at? Don't look at just one instance of your getting it right or getting it wrong. It's actually the overall trajectory of your life that lets you know where you're really at. It's looking at where you used to be, where you're at now, and where you're headed. Not just that, okay, I blew it in the moment here, or, hey, I got it right over here, so God must be really thrilled with me. This is not the way that God deals with us whatsoever. It's not a roller coaster like that. So you just need to look at the overall trajectory for your information about where you were at. So David has this opportunity to get even, and he doesn't take it. Once again, he tells him, no, I'm not going to do it. But this guy with him, he goes, but I think that God has handed him over. And I see it in this. I just want to give you like a quick caution. I know this will sound really obvious when I say it, so I don't want you to feel like I'm talking down to you, but I'll be honest, it's really not as obvious as you might think it is. And that's this. God does not lead you outside of his will or outside of his word. Now, why do I say that? I say that because there will be people that will do horrible things or make really foolish decisions and then blame it on God. Like I've seen someone blow their family up, go, you know what? I no longer want to be married to you. I want to be married to them. And guess what? God told me to do it. It's God's will for me and you to be together. I go, really? You heard that from God? Are you sure that was God? Or like people will go, you know what? There's better opportunities in Florida than there are in West Virginia. Just my family moved to Florida. God told us to do it, though. Isn't it funny how every time we want to do something, God told us to do it? I feel like Christians, and I'm not saying God doesn't tell you to do something. I just think a lot of times Christians blame whatever they want to do on God. They just go, oh, yeah, no, God told me to do it. God told me. Well, why doesn't God talk more about faithfulness then if he's always talking to you? Why doesn't he talk more to you about obedience than like leaning into whatever it is that you like? It's interesting to me that every time God speaks, he sounds so much like us. It's so interesting to me. Because he's going, look, Dave, you got this opportunity. I think God's given it to you. And David's probably thinking, no, listen. My God does not change week to week. What my God sees as right and wrong does not change from instance number 1 to instance number 3. God is consistent, and so God is not changing. So I just want to make sure that you caution yourself before you make any life-altering decisions and blame it on God. He will not lead you outside of his word. He won't tell you to do something that goes in contradiction with something that he said not to do previously. Verse 9. Verse 9 says this, no, David said, don't kill him, for who can remain innocent after attacking the Lord's anointed one? Surely the Lord will strike Saul down someday, or he will die of old age or in battle. The Lord forbid that I should kill the one who he has anointed. But take his spear and that jug of water beside his head, and then let's get out of here. So David goes, nope, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to trust God. I'm going to leave it all up to God, just like I did the first time with Saul, just like I did last week with Nabal. I'm going to leave it up to God. I do not have to get blood on my hands. I do not have to stoop to his level. I can remain innocent even though he has come against me. I can do that. But David has one more additional thing he's going to do. He takes Saul's spear and the jug of water beside his head. Then verse 12 says this, so David took the spear, the jug of water, near Saul's head, then he and Abishai got away. Now here's what happens, long story short. David and Abishai, they go up to the mountain close by to where they're at. And while all those folks are still sleeping, David decides to wake them up with a little bit of taunting. He starts with Abner, who is sleeping next to Saul, who is supposed to be the commander of the Lord, or the commander of the Israel's army. He's supposed to be the one tasked with keeping Saul safe. And so David wakes him up with a little bit of trash talk. He goes, Abner, you didn't do a very good job seeing the fact that, look what we have. And he has this spear and this jug of water in his hand. He wakes Saul up. Saul realizes his mistake. My goodness, I got it wrong again. David had a chance to get even with me. He let me go free. I didn't deserve that. But he let me go free. And this will be the last time David and Saul will come face to face with each other before Saul's death. Now, I told you, it was a lot like 2 weeks ago. That's why we're not going to get back into how you need to be more like David, because honestly, those sorts of sermons, you need to be more like David, you need to be more like David, or we can put it into a New Testament context, you need to be more like Jesus, you need to be more like Jesus. The problem with that is it doesn't actually help you see yourself properly, and until you see yourself properly, you will not actually get where you want to go. Because here's why. When we read this story, or really any story, here's what I need you to get to, is this idea right here. You are not the hero of the stories that you read. You are not David. You're not just some struggling king that just needs to try a little bit harder, and then you could do the stuff that David does. Right? Because this is what so many like religious folk, they'll go, no, I'm just a struggling king that if I just read my Bible more, if I just attended church more, if I just gave more, if I just had more quiet time, if I just, and we think that there is some sort of formula that if we would just try hard enough, then I could actually be like David. That's actually not the key to being like David. It's not. The key to being like David and eventually getting onto the right path to being able to treat people the way David treated Saul and Nabal, here's the key to it, is for you to finally grasp, this is true throughout all of the scriptures, that you are not David. But you are somebody in this story, and you have been someone in this story every single week, whether you noticed it or not. You are not David. I am not David. However, we are Saul. We are Saul over and over and over because we have transgressed against God's anointed one. We have been the mad one, fully guilty, going toe-to-toe with the innocent one. We are Saul, and the quicker that we grab a hold of the fact that we are Saul, the quicker that we can actually get the really good message. Because you might have showed up today and you're like, well, at least they got cupcakes in the lobby, because that kind of was a gut punch. Because I kind of thought I was just Dave, but just Dave having a bad day. You're not Dave. You're Saul, and so am I. But that's not a bad thing. That's not that thing that we walk away from church going, man, I suck. Man, he told me I was Saul. He told me I was coming against God's anointed. Because this is what a lot of times we hear stuff like this at church and we walk away feeling so discouraged. No. This isn't to make you discouraged, just so you can see the beauty of the story. Because if you're Saul, look what happens. If you're Saul, that means that the anointed king that has every right to take your life, to punish you, that he has let you go free. I thought more people would be excited to hear that this morning, that your Saul and the anointed king made a way for you to go free without you having to pay for what it is that you have done every time that you have transgressed against him, every time that you have gotten it wrong. He made a way for you to not have to be punished. You are undeniably Saul, and that's good news because now the king can have mercy on you. See, if you're David, then you just got to try harder. If you are Saul, then you can receive the mercy of the king. When you finally get that, that will transform you. Because you'll realize coming into the life God has for you is not about you trying harder, but about you receiving the message of what Jesus has done for you and getting that as deep inside of you as possible. Because that message that he has done everything, you have done nothing, on your worst day will wrap its arms of love around you and remind you that you still have a king that is crazy about you. And on your best day, that message will also knock you down a couple pegs the way you don't think you're so awesome. That's the beauty of the gospel message. The gospel message holds us on our worst day and humbles us on our best day. So the way we can always be reminded that what's going on here is not about me. I am not the main character of the story. I am Saul. I am guilty. But for some reason, the king is letting me go free. And when I get that message, the only proper response then, when I realize that the king, who had every right, David had every right, think about this, to pick that spear up and stick it right through Saul's heart. Every right to do it. But you know what? The king doesn't have to pierce you with his spear because he decided that he would get pierced with a spear on your behalf. He doesn't have to take your life because he decided he would give his on your behalf. That's the best. As soon as you will grab a hold of the fact that you are not Dave and that you're Saul, then the mercy and the grace of God can begin to flow to you in transformative ways. It will unburden you from this rat race of trying to be good enough, of trying to earn it on your own, of trying to, if I could just work a little bit harder, if I could just pray a little more, if I could just be more consistent. No. It will release you from that. The gospel message of what Jesus has done for you, a lot of times we just see that as the message that gets people into Christianity, right? It's the message like, how do we get people saved? And it's the gospel message. But it's more than that. The gospel message of what Jesus has done for us is also the transformative message that we need to preach to ourselves daily. You will become, ready for this? You will become more Christ-like when you realize that you are not Jesus, but rather that you need Jesus. You can become a kinder person when you realize his kindness of how he has let you go free. You can become a more generous person when you realize how generous he has been towards you, even though you did not deserve it. You will become a more selfless person when you realize that the most selfless person and the most selfless act ever was him on the cross in your place. When you begin to talk to yourself every day like that, man, can you believe all that God has done for me, given the fact of all that I have done? That is a transformative message that can then get you ultimately where you want to go. You stop playing the game about how good you are. You understand just how broken you are, and then that king can begin to put the pieces back together. You have to receive the hard news of where you're really at, so the way you can get ultimately where God wants you to go. The more of it you get, the more transformation you will receive. The more of it, it's not like, how many times whenever you fail, you mess things up, how often is our initial reaction, oh, I got to do better, right? Oh, I got to do better. Oh, or like, I like this one, whenever people will be far away from the church for a while, and then something, all hell will break loose in their life, and they show up the very next Sunday, they go, I knew I just needed to get back in church. I go, no. See, a lot of times we substitute church when we actually meant to say Jesus. Glad that you're back at church, but what you need is the gospel message of Jesus. You don't just need church. You don't just need religious activity. You need a gospel message that will transform you to the way you will come to understand that it is not about you. But what we try to do so often when we're trying to transform our lives, we get so hyper-focused on what it is that we're trying to change. Y'all ever notice this? You get real hyper-focused, like, oh, I'm trying not to do this, I'm trying not to do this, I'm not trying not to do this. And the more that you think about not doing this, the more that you do this. But what if you just spent all day sitting there going, I have a king that has let me go free, and I do not deserve it. I've done nothing to warrant this. I've done nothing to earn his mercy and his grace. The more that you start to get that in you, the more that will come out of you. Focus on your sin. It's just going to produce more sin. I know that it seems like if I will just focus on this, I could get it out of me. No. You focus on him, he'll take care of the rest. It's the gospel message. It's transformative in a way that we may not realize. So, this morning, how many of us could come to grips with the idea that we're Saul and we're not just David having a bad day? We are actually guilty and in need of the king to set us free. We are actually worthy of getting the spear, but we need to trust in a king that took the spear for us. We're worthy of death, but we need to trust more in a king that took our place to give us life. That's what he's done for you. He's not mad at you. He's not trying to punish you. He is crazy about you. And the more you'll let that get into you, the more you'll see him coming out of you. We got some people that would absolutely love to pray with you. I know in a room this size, somebody has something where they've been trying so hard. They've been letting failure just keep them trapped because they forgot that on their best day and their worst day, God's love for them was still the same. There's got to be somebody that needs to get set free today of the performance trap, of having their own way, of making a mess of things. There's got to be someone that comes to realize that I deserve the spear, but today I'm going to trust in the one that took it for me. If that's you, somebody's going to be up front. They'd love to pray with you. Our prayer room is open in the back. If you're online, send us a message. We would love for you to respond to this message. However God is leading you, however God is guiding you. But today is the day for you to respond because his gift of salvation, his gift of freedom, his gift of being set free, it's for you.